Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Monica Attard. I'm co-director of the UTS Centre for Media Transition, and I welcome you here today. Thank you for joining us for the launch of this very special book, An Incomplete History of Community Radio, 2SER's 46 Boxes of Stuff, which is a great title, I'm sure you'll agree. We are meeting today in many different places, such as the nature of Zoom life in 2021. We are not on one land, but I want to acknowledge and pay respect to the Gadigal land, to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, upon whose lands many of us live and work, and to pay respects to their elders past, present and emerging. We acknowledge them as the owners of country and the holders of knowledge for this place. Their land was never ceded. Now, briefly, some housekeeping before we get started. If you have questions for the speakers today, please pop them into the Q&A. You can use the chat for other comments, including any questions about technical issues if you have them, and a reminder that we are, in fact, recording. So the CMT is really proud, happy to be launching this book today into the big, wide, wonderful world. Liz and Dom have really put their heart into this, and they've produced a wonderful glimpse of what working at 2SER was like and is like, its particular culture, its firebrand journalism, its characters, many of whom have gone on to do extraordinary things in Australian news media and media more generally. It's truly a book about media holding on to good cultures whilst paving the way for new ones. So this really is a celebration. Again, thank you for being here. And at this point, I'm going to introduce you to Liz Giuffre, who has some very, very special material to share with you. Liz, over to you.
Thanks, Monica. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. Thanks very much for joining us. It's a bit weird to do a book launch over Zoom. Normally, you would imagine yourself mulling around a bookstore, maybe you might have a glass of lukewarm but well-meaning bubbly, maybe a bit of cheese. It's a bit on the plasticky side, so just imagine that, or pick it up if it's near you and you need to do that. I just want to say, first of all, that I'm here on the Gadigal lands of the people of the Gadigal the Eora Nation. I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, land that's never ceded. I wanted to thank also for helping us launch this book, Monica and the CMT. Also Tamsin and Anna for the Australian Centre for Public History, and a couple of people that I want to talk to you about that have helped make this book happen. Oh, that doesn't work so well on the Zoom, does it? All the Zoom magic. So this book has actually been happening for almost 4 years now. We worked out when I first saw the 46 boxes of stuff, and it's not just, as Monica says very kindly, a nice title. It was literally what the archive of 2SER was. Tamsin Peach for the Centre for Public History and Melanie Withnall, who was the Managing Director of 2SER at the time, said, we've got a 40th anniversary coming up. I think we've got, do you have an archive? Well, we've got a bunch of stuff, and the stuff's in the basement. So come and have a look at the basement. So intrepid as we were, we went down to have a look, and literally through puddles and bits of wire and stuff, OH&S wasn't great then, as indeed it wasn't on the front cover that we can talk about in a minute. The beginnings and the 40th anniversary have always been places where, we're a bit rock and roll. So there was just these boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff. I'm not an archivist, even though I've ended up being at times the station's archivist. That just means I look after the old stuff. But this wasn't an archive in the traditional sense. So we didn't have to make sure that things were kept as they always had been, because they've been moved around a lot over the station's history. There was things that were mislabeled. There were things that weren't labelled at all. There were things that were covered in various shall we say, the bits and pieces. You can pick up what I'm putting down. So with the help of the School of Comms at UTS here, we were able to have a little space to move the 46 boxes out, to consolidate them and to start having a look. And one of the first people to do that was at the station, Jess Scully, who gave us a hand literally with a trolley in getting things up out of the boxes over to the School of Comms. Then we had an excellent RA, Dr. Chris Comerford, who had as, the only way I can really describe it is he had superhuman restraint. Because I don't know about you, but if you're a bit of a hobby archivist, it's very hard to look at one box to move it and keep going to the next box. You got to open it, right? And you might be finding this at the moment yourselves as you're looking at for your Christmas decorations. You might be thinking, oh, I'll just have a look at that. And then 3 days later, you're still looking at the one box. Chris had the wonderful ability to just look at a box, label it, and keep going. So he got through the boxes first for us to just give us a bit of an inventory to let us know what was there. After that, we then went through the digging process to say, all right, so what do we actually have and how can we make some stories out of this wonderful archive? So what we've ended up with from the 46 boxes of stuff is 46 stories in this book. And they range around stories that we knew about, but also stories we didn't know. So that hence the title, The Incomplete History. And the incomplete history is partly an acknowledgement of that and an invitation. So friends, if you're listening, if you know anybody, if you were somebody who was part of the station that hasn't been featured in this one, come back and give us your story so we can add to it for the 50th. But also too, what was really important was that we made some choices to how we were going to update things and verify things. So the basis of this book is a bunch of original interviews and updated interviews with people who were founding family of the station over its years that could come back and help reflect, fill in some gaps. And Dom and I found, just as we were doing this in the final stages of production, those very generous extended family members were still adding to the story for us as we went. The incompleteness of it too also means that there were some things that we've deliberately left out or we've deliberately kind of amended. One, for example, is a letter that is now only known as The Letter by someone called, we won't name the person, even though they are now a very prominent member of the Australian media, because the beauty of community radio and community media is that it's the place that a lot of people get their start. And so as we're going through, we're finding baby pictures and we're finding baby audio or baby video, baby letters. And this person, we thought, this would be amazing. We'll put this in, we'll tell the big story, this person will love it. But we thought, let's just, professional courtesy, also ethics. Let's be nice. Let's ask this person if they're actually happy to be named. And if they're not, we just won't name them. This person very nicely said, that's lovely, but please don't name us. So now we have letters from Mr. X. We also have other things, other artefacts like, Dom, shall I tell them about the T-shirts now?
I think now would be the time to let that particular cat out of the bag.
Yeah.
And then put it back in again.
Yeah. So the other story that we had to kind of decide, how were we going to tell this story, or were we going to tell this story? One of the boxes was a whole box of signed Rolf Harris T-shirts. Well, actually, no, there were 2SER T-shirts that were signed by Rolf Harris, let me be clear. Now, I mean, while there was probably never a time that it made sense to have Rolf Harris on 2SER, it was 2009, 2010, 2020, 2021 is probably even less of a time these days. But we wanted to decide, this is an incomplete history, but still a history. What should we do with this stuff? So really, that's what we've talked about in the book, is what do we do with those items that are part of our history but are really problematic. And again, in part of the final process of writing this up and putting this together, a lot of the contributors, or people that we interviewed rather, interviewees, we did send versions of the final piece to them just to get their final okay. And we ended up with a postscript by one of our former volunteers, David Jobling, who again helped us recontextualise that artefact. So it's been really nice that this, even though it's a history, it's a really living history. And again, as I say, it's incomplete. So we would very much like to hear from you if there is something that you feel we've missed, something you'd like to know more of. Also, I guess, knowing that not everything made it into the boxes. So that's something we need to think about too. Would now be the time, do you think then? I see that we've got two people that are joining us who are former friends of the station and continued friends of the station because they're giving up their time, very, very busy time at the moment. Is it okay if I introduce you two friends now? Yep.
Yeah.
Jess and Robbie. Hello.
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 Hi, great to be here.
So nice to have you. So with us first of all is Jess Scully, who's the current Deputy Lord Mayor of Sydney, and author. You're a bit busy at the moment, Jess. So thank you.
Yeah, a little bit busy at the moment. We've got an election on Saturday. If you haven't voted, everyone, go out and vote today or tomorrow. Get it out of the way. But yes, thanks, Liz. Good to
I
be
love
here.
it. No, let's do all the spruiking. So while you're there, buy a book, then vote. Love it, love it. Also
Yeah,
joining us,
exactly.
I didn't know you were going to compete with me for who had the best lady glasses as well, but I appreciate that. That's good. You win. Excellent. Also joining us is Robbie Buck, who needs no introduction, particularly to the radio. Although, you know, Robbie, if you need a hand with anything in a little while, if you're missing a microphone, we've got plenty. We'd love to have you.
Well, there's actually quite a bit of synchronicity, obviously, because can you guys hear me?
You've just frozen up, Robbie. Oh, I think you're back.
Oh, Robbie's keeping it real for community radio. What we always joke about, but it is true, that if it's too schmick, people will get a little bit suspicious, won't they? Community radio's always got to be a bit rock and roll, so he's bringing it in for the rock and roll. I'll be back. This is Robbie Buck, the remix.
Someone in the chat saying, Robot Robbie.
Robot Robbie.
That's how they're going to replace him.
Okay. While Robbie's scratching it up and scratching it back again.
It's gone out. Yeah. I'll call you back.
Yeah, he's like Freaky Loops back in the day. But Jess, is it all right if we have a little chat to you first? And then I also know
I'd love that.
You've got to run away and do, Deputy Lord Mayor business. But do you mind telling us, and we're a little bit embarrassed here, because if we look at the beautiful index of this book, your name doesn't appear. And I think it's because your work at the station didn't make it to our boxes. So can you tell us a bit about your time at 2SER and what you were doing?
Sure. I mean, I think that one of the downsides, I guess, of the digital era is that there's less ephemera, right? There's just less stuff to collect and archive. And it's all fuzzy in my mind too, because I actually had two SER experiences. The first was when I was a student at UTS, so back in like the year 99, 2000, 2001, and I remember working on, I think, the Razor's Edge at that point, and that was when 2SER was up the top of the tower. And that was a whole other experience. Those windows that looked like they hadn't been cleaned since they were put in, and you could have this sort of constant sepia tone view of the city, and you.
Oh no!
Just lost Jess as well.
Oh my goodness!
What about now? Am I back?
Yes, you are.
All
See,
right,
that's what happens when you make fun of the windows. The window police are getting you.
Yeah, the tower, the ghost of the tower. And then I came back in, I think it was either 2012 or 2013, and
oh my goodness, the ghosts are really in the tower. While Jess is sorting herself out,
I'm back. I promise. Hopefully I'll stick with you this time. So in 2012 or 2013 it started So Hot Right Now, and it was really a really exciting opportunity. It was Saturday morning, talking about arts and culture in a really lighthearted and broad way. And I met some really awesome people who were volunteers and helped design that 2-hour show of just chat, basically, on arts and culture. And I believe the show is still going, actually, which is super exciting. And I love, switching it on. There's a new cohort generation, Saved by the Bell generation 8 of So Hot Right Now still rolling. But 2SER is one of those stations that I think once you get it in your blood, like, it's always there, and you always want to tune back in and get a taste of it. And it always manages to maintain this kind of connection between history and legacy and these long running institutions, and then the taste of the new and the young and the fresh that keeps coming through as well. So I have so many wonderful memories of the station, and so much that I love and fell in love with from the beginning on 2SER. So I love that you've done this, but we're going to have to do the updated Instagram version, essentially.
I think so too. And Jess, were you at all, while you're busy putting things together, did it ever occur to you to hit save somewhere or hit record. Like, I mean, you might be using one of these ones. Here's one I prepared earlier that I actually can't open. But these floppy disk situation with one of those.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't even know if we, I worked with some cleverer people than me who are still making good radio content, who probably save some stuff. So my sort of, right-hand woman was Caitlin Gibson, who makes incredible podcasts and does other stuff. So I bet she's got some recordings. And so I might, I'd put you in touch with her. I'm sure we've got some content left. Particularly our really super cheesy theme song as well that she cooked up. So I'll have to get that over to you, Liz.
Yeah, is it? And are there things that you have strategically lost? Because one thing we found here when we contacted people, there was a little bit of, oh, you don't have that, do you? Is there a bit of that going on?
Do you know, I'm really happy there's no photographs or evidence of freaky loops at the Wentworth building anywhere in
Oh, I was there.
Come on, Robbie, bring it on home. Do tell, please, do tell.
Oh, well, look, I went to the first Freaky Loops one, which was just Seb and Luke when they put it on. It was a revelation that a community station could do what they did there. And it was a really amazing time in Sydney's history to be combining music at that stage. I guess the electronic scene in Sydney was a really vital and exciting place to be. And those guys were the real masters of it. But it also, what I loved about 2SER is that, you had the Nick Fishers of this world who were very popular, big commercial DJs and really great at what they did. Simon Coffey, DJ Nervous, used to do a lot of stuff as well. When I first arrived, there were people like Prince Andrew who were covering the sort of Jamaican sounds of things. And then you had Barb Morrison doing the country as well. And this great kind of mix of, and I guess music is the metaphor for it in many ways, this great mix of culture and sound sort of butting up against each other and people being forced to, being pushed into each other's genre zones and culture zones and things. And it made for a really exciting, vibrant time. It also was, for me, it was an introduction to Sydney, and I couldn't have imagined a better introduction to Sydney, to be in amongst people who are actually, I didn't want to use the word underground, but they're there in the soil, kind of like worms, sort of digesting all this stuff, and it's impossible not to be really excited by it. So, well done on finding some of this history. It's just amazing.
Now, speaking of finding history, I have a couple of comments to make. To Jess, I know one of your assistants on, I assume, the 2013 show was a comedian doing amazing stuff now called Nina Oyama.
Nina Oyama, totally.
I'd love to think that there's some recording of her in her earliest years that can be added to an archive, a greatest hits, or something in some years' time.
Totally. I mean, I don't know if Nina was quite as filthy as she's gotten in her more recent comedy exploits.
Just let me step in there. The first time I saw her perform, she was in year 11 or 12. She was in school uniform. She had her bag. She'd just arrived from school to do some open mic. No, she wasn't as filthy then. I'll let you continue.
No, I mean, you're right. It's such a talent factory. I mean, that's the thing that everybody knows about 2SER. And I get this like amazing burst of pride every time I see Nina on like Utopia. And she's just come back from LA. Like she's doing all this amazing stuff as a comedian. And yeah, she was with us for a little while before she went off to study in Bathurst and radicalized Bathurst, which was really good to see. Beck Allen was one of our producers as well on So Hot Right Now. And she then went on to be the cultural attaché at the Washington Embassy. So don't pretend like we didn't have some high culture there on So Hot Right Now. And Andy Huang has gone on to do amazing stuff at Sydney Uni and in curating their ideas work. But amazing people come through 2SER. And I was lucky Melanie Withnall was also the general manager when I was at 2SER. And then I saw her just like running the show at ABC Sydney for a while as well. And now moving on to other big things too. So, it is the talent factory of Broadway that is just keeping the airwaves pumping like throughout the country.
Excellent. And Robbie, there's a few things we couldn't get hold of for the book. If there was another 47 chapters, we still would have things missing. But one of the flaws is there's not a chapter on Aloha Freaky Monday. I hear you're leaving 702. Is it to come back and relaunch Aloha Freaky Monday?
You know what? I'm so glad that you brought that up, Dom, because of all the programs that I did at 2SER, and I'm much older than Jess and go back even further. I started there in probably the beginning of '92, so almost 30 years ago. But Aloha Freaky Monday, I think, was one of the most exciting programs I've ever worked on in any media at all, because it really harnessed what the potential of community radio is. And by that, I mean, it's big on imagination, zero on budget, but all about exploring the possibilities of a medium. And for people who missed it, and you would have, because it was about 25, 26, 7 years ago, Aloha Freaky Monday was a program, yes, it was on a Monday, that took over when the education show of the time, it was like a higher education show, when it went on hiatus because of university holidays. They had this 2-hour hole to fill, and some great minds decided to come up with a show called Aloha Freaky Monday. Now, when I say great minds, Kath Dwyer, who now is the manager for Radio National, and of course we're seeing off Fran Kelly this morning, Ant Sharwood, who has just released 2 great books about the Alpine region in New South Wales, from Snow to Ash and the Brumby Wars. He was working for a bookie at the time, and who was Pete Lewis, who runs Essential Media, who does a lot of behind the scenes work for political parties and for research, and various others, really great, smart people. And also they allowed me to come in, which was very nice of them. But we used to do things like live cat splays. Not actually, we'd get a vet in and we'd make them pretend as though they were doing a surgery on the radio, and come up with sound effects, etc. We had, so many really silly, really fun things. I'm trying to rack my brains on it, but
I remember one sketch that was written about a tribe that worshipped the goddess Kali, that had brought her back to life, and of course she was at the top of the charts at the time, our Kali. So it was just all types of silliness, which was fun.
Yeah, and. Jeff Minards, who went on to become a drug counsellor, he and his companion did the Doppler effect, where, I mean, you wouldn't get away with it these days because they were putting on silly voices of all kinds of accents and stuff. But it was, the idea of it was to try and push what radio could do. And I think this is where 2SER really shines, is when it finds its own form that's not, just wanting to be the ABC or wanting to be commercial radio, where it becomes its own form. One of the other programs, and nobody else would have heard this because nobody listened, that I was involved in, Simon Aveling, who is jack shit, he used to do the graveyard shift on a Monday morning. So from, what is it, 1 a.m. to 6 a.m. on a Monday morning, the graveyardist graveyard shift. And I was working at Triple J at the time, and I was doing the weekends, and so I had nothing to do on a Sunday night. So we would go in and we would use Studio 2, which had like 4 turntables and 2 reel-to-reel machines, might have even still had a couple of cart machines. And we would load up every piece of equipment in the studio, every piece. We'd just find random tapes and spool them up. We'd find records and things like that. We'd take transistors in, and we would just play the studio like an instrument. We'd just, with the two of us, just be mixing across all the different audio. And I know it sounds like it must have been absolutely terrible, but we still have some tapes of those. And it's amazing how, who knows who was listening? Probably nobody. But the idea that you could do that, you can't do it in any other radio anywhere else. And it was really exciting. And it really informed, for me, what the capacity is as a broadcaster, what you can actually do in a radio studio. And for that, for that, community radio is just the top for the capacity to be able to do that.
I'm glad you said you kept a tape. To me, it's probably the freakiest of loops. But I also want to say to you, Robbie, there is one tape that we must dig out, we must make available in some shape or form. It's Robert Buck Presents Evening Classics. Tell me about that.
Yeah, well, thankfully there was a tape up until about mid 90s, maybe late 90s, and thankfully I think it's been lost to time. But the whole way I got into community radio, and again, the beauty of it is that I had a school teacher when I was in grade 5 who did a community radio show, did a classical music show, and he was a relief teacher, a guy called Gary Martin, really lovely bloke, and he, instead of teaching us what we were supposed to be teaching, he was waxing lyrical about all sorts of things and mentioned that he did community radio. And I said to him, I'd love to come and see that. And so that's actually detailed in the book, which is very kind of you. But it at the age of 10, I basically got my first community radio show, which was Evening Classics with Robert Buck. And thankfully, there is no trace of it anywhere.
There's that. And now it's time for the reveal? No. Jess, can I ask you another quick question? And I do know that your time is, people are pulling you in lots of different ways. So if you need to gently glide, we will, we can give you a little station ID and let you go. We can throw to an ad or a theme or something. Yeah, you took a path that, I guess, to go from community radio to serving the community, to literally serving this city. Can you tell us a bit about, is there a relationship between those two things? Do you think getting in touch with people over the airwaves and then thinking, oh, maybe I'll be a mayor lady deputy person, is that kind of how it happened?
Didn't happen exactly like that, but I can see what you mean. Like, one of the things that really excited me about doing community radio is, you'd go in there on a Saturday morning, in my case, and you'd be pretty exhausted, and then just feel the energy from the people that you talk to, and you never know. You think you've programmed the show, but you haven't. The show is its own beast that comes to life as it happens, and the combination of voices and experiences and stories, you just realize that actually the world is so much bigger and more diverse and exciting and confronting and funny than you can ever predict. And so you get this little window of that, and you get to have these really open conversations with people, and then you get hooked on it and you just kind of want to keep doing it. But 2SER is extraordinary like that, and I think from the first experiences that I remember of listening to 2SER was of being transported and having the world opened up in unexpected ways. And for me, one of the first show that I really got hooked on was Masala Mix. For example, like Masala Mix that Miguel de Sousa used to host. And, my dad's Indian. I come from an Indian background, and I never thought that it was cool to listen to Indian music, and then suddenly you had these really cool people digging up this incredible, vital, exciting, fun music and putting on shows. And it completely changed the way I thought about my culture and that culture. And then you had someone like Greg Poppleton with the Phantom Dancer, and then that's a time machine that just
still going too.
Extraordinary, right? That just kind of catapults you into a different place as well. So, oh my gosh, and so many shows like that where they actually expand your worldview and your mind, and that I think makes you, a better advocate for people, or able to tell more stories or make more room for more stories. And so I think, even just listening to 2SER was hugely educational in that way.
Sounds great. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And do you mind if we rack your brains just for a little bit? What do you have any advice for the next kind of, as we move forward? You know what I mean? We've got 46 boxes of stuff. We're still on the lookout. So again, if anybody listening, if you've got, if you want to go and have a look under your bed, see what's hanging around. But do you have any advice for, what you think we should be doing at the moment? How we should be kind of, well, first of all, looking after that incomplete history, where we should be looking, what we should be doing?
I guess there's a bit of a need to bring some of this stuff into a digital forum and for it to be accessible, particularly to younger people and people who are online. So how do you turn this into a series of really great Instagram posts, or, I think that's the place to be. I know that I'm too old for TikTok, but you know, I mean, you know, there are people also doing that on TikTok, but you know, you could get on there and I think sharing some of this stuff, because sometimes in Sydney we can have a bit of a short memory and we don't realize that this really cool stuff happened 10 years, 20 years, 30 years before we got involved. And so I'd love to see it go on Insta and for the call out to happen that way, and so people could contribute like video and snippets, and to kind of chart through how some of those shows have continued but also evolved over that time. And doing that online would be really great, but that's a whole other job. And and this is a mammoth achievement in itself, so congratulations.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and we should acknowledge too that we got some money from UTS to put the old listening posts, the magazine that went with the station. How many years were we talking about? Oh, look, Robbie, there you go. Couldn't have been better set up if we planned it. So we got to digitise all of those, and they're now out there for the broad world. And what was interesting when we were putting this together is we'd speak to people and they'd say, that didn't happen. And we'd say, well, this document says that it did from 1981 or from when it, so, you know, we've got all of that extra stuff now that is completely searchable, never was before. So, you know, our lovely students or anybody who's listening, amateur archivists, proper archivists, historians, all of you, now we've got this content we can dig through too, which is lovely. And it is all very searchable, shareable, free via Trove. It's lovely.
Yeah.
And it'll spark further. Oh, sorry, go on, Robbie.
No, I was going to say, I actually, Greg Poppleton lives very close to me, and I ran into him on the street the other day, and somebody had posted, Jane Connors, who's on the board of the ABC, had posted an old listening post photograph from 1994 or something like that with Greg and myself and a bunch of others at an outside broadcast. And so, you know, it's floating around there. I just going back to Aloha Freaky Monday as well. One of the really great nights we had was when Tiny Tim and Martin Sharp came in, you know, and Kath Dwyer still has the full page Luna Park poster signed by Martin Sharp from that night, you know. So there are things floating around. Audio is probably a bit harder, but there's going to be tons of stuff out there, because, you know, this is a time of your life for all of us who spent time at 2SER, a time that was so special that you do cling to those artifacts as much as you can. I should mention Mark Robinson as well, of course, you know, who was somebody who gave us so much training, guidance about radio and radio interviewing for so many people throughout the years too. It would be remiss not to mention his name in all of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we were very lucky too, as part of this, to be able to pay tribute to people who've passed or who were sort of behind the scenes that you might not necessarily find in any other ways. So somebody like David Rose, for example, who, as we were doing interviews, I don't know if David was during your time or not, but was somebody who was spoke about very fondly, and people would drop his name. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I know. I hosted a breakfast show with Dave.
Yeah,
and he I mean. Yeah, he was a lovely, lovely man, and a really major part of the structure of 2SER. And you know, his death was a really shocking tragedy, I've got to say. And he was such a big part of the station. Kath Duncan, who trained me to begin with. You know, so many people who were there, threads through this massive tapestry.
Yeah, Jill Emberson too, who has been mentioned in the chat as well, but was we lost only very recently, is also in there too. That, you know, and somebody who flew the flag for a long time too. It's funny, with the exception of your good selves, it's funny when you go through, when we were looking for people, how do you find people? Do you go to LinkedIn? Do you search to 2SER? What do you do? And Jess Clayman was very good at doing that. But it's interesting to see who would keep things in and keep things out. And Jill always had 2SER right up front and centre to say that that's where she became from. So we were very, very, very honoured to be able to pay tribute to her as well.
That's great.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that if you do go through the digitised listening posts and you were around at any of that stage of 2SER's life, you're going to remember things you've forgotten, and you're going to remember things we missed in the book. So look, you know, I can't guarantee I'll be around for it, but the station will be. There will be a 50th. And, you know, there's a lot more of the story to tell. So if you know anything, if we got it wrong, tell us. Let us know so that we can start compiling the list of names of people to chase up, for example. You know, there's more of the story to tell, and it's in the digging through the dirt and the what, not in a bad way, but that groundswell you were talking about, Robbie, the worms in the dirt, getting into the stories, the actual searching for it, that is part of the journey. It's really gorgeous to be that involved with the community, even as the after effect with the artifacts. It is something that's living, breathing, and continuing. So I'm just saying, there's going to be another book. Read this one, tell us what we missed out on, and help us get the next one together.
And tell us what you want digitised too. You did mention about the tapes. We were lucky to be able to get a bunch of tapes digitised. We actually had a City of Sydney grant to help us do with some of that. And when we did some digitisation, we had a pop-up day where we asked people to it was an amnesty basically, bring us your stuff, we'll get it assessed and we'll see what we can afford to get digitised. And there's a chapter in the book all about that, about how you would do it. And we did a thing called Good Enough Archiving, which was basically how can we preserve something good enough that we can at least get it to the next stage of its life, or that it will just get it out of the water. We'll get it up on stilts. We can't quite take it further, but it won't be any more underwater. I wish I was joking about that, but that's literally what happened.
Right. Wow.
So, you know, there's all of that too. But then now that we've got this stuff, we go through it, we've got to catalogue it, we've got to work out what to do with it. So, you know, there's some really interesting threads to keep pulling out of. So again, if anybody wants to volunteer, you know, that would be nice too. That'd be really, really nice.
Can I just say, Liz, as well, and Dom, look, I really am so impressed that you guys have put something like this to paper and gone to that effort, because, you know, we're talking about individual radio shows and talking about individual people as part of the station. But of course, the real story is not what happened on the 26th floor or you know, later further down, but what happened once those airwaves were received into radios across the city. And that's where it became really exciting, because it fed so much energy into the musical culture and the fabric of Sydney over that time in ways that I mean, you can't overstate at times, particularly if you look at some of those dance parties and some of the dance culture that was going on before the internet was accessible. That was the connection to what was happening in Chicago or London or elsewhere. And, you know, that is a big part of the story, is that it's, you know, we're talking about what happens in the studio and what happens in the offices, but really it's about when you stood up there on the 26th floor and you'd look out across those lights across Sydney and you knew that the transmitter was beaming these crazy sounds into people's radios and people's homes. And it was leaving these lingering effects over years. And we'll never know what kind of legacy that is, but it's definitely there and it's definitely tangible. So, you know, I really wanted to make that note too.
Thank you. That's really lovely. While we're talking about that tower, should we explain the tower? It's behind us and it's on the cover of the book. And I actually think, I didn't think this through, did I? This is testing out how good that PhD is for spatial awareness, which is not very. If you have a look at Rose's little screen there, it's and we've actually got, I think I saw David Vlag pop up. So we've actually got a direct descendant of somebody who's on this tower. Dom, do you want to tell the story of the picture of the tower? And it's a plug. It's chapter 16. If you're wanting to follow along in your hymn books, there, friends.
Well, of course. The tower speaks of the building, the ugly brutalist tower it began as the Institute of Technology. It's now the University of Technology, Sydney's building number 1. But at the very top, there's an added bit upon which the antenna stands. And the cover of the photo shows antenna testing with Bill Antes, who's the fellow in white on the very left, Marina Armani, who's the person in the dress, and John Vag is the fellow in the black trousers, leaning out further than I would ever want to lean out. I think I'm getting vertigo just looking at him, holding the extra bit of antenna. And it's,
Dom, if you hold the book just in front of your face, we can actually see it. The Zoom magic is doing that. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Oh, yeah. I've got to be careful it doesn't disappear into the background. How's that?
Sort of, kind of. No, there it is. There it is. You've disappeared. Ah, there it is. Look at that. Look at that. Yeah.
So,
how does she look so relaxed? Like she looks like she's like standing next to a pool or something. This is insanity. Don't do this at home. Don't try this at home.
So Bill explained the story as well, because Bill was part of designing the whole situation. He was an engineer, still an engineer, and all of that business. And it sounds like it was much more casual than it really should have been. You know, I mean, if nothing else, I want to know, what would you choose a frock on that day? I might have moved to sensible pants by that point, unless she didn't know.
I must point out her surname is Armani, and I wonder if that's product placement.
I think she's wearing heels. I don't think those are steel-capped PPE boots here.
No, they are heels. You're right. They are heels.
I have failed as a human being and as a feminist. Look at that. That's just, I mean, here we are making fun of it. We should be applauding. It's Ginger Rogers all over again, isn't it? Doing it backwards and in heels. My goodness.
Absolutely. I mean, this is kind of a beautiful visual metaphor for running a community radio station, I think. I mean, the whole thing is just this massive high wire act, you know, and it's all the love and the goodwill of people doing this in between all of the stuff they do to survive and, you know, to take care of their families. And yet they're here for the love of it. They're right out on the edge and they're making it happen. It's beautiful.
It is. And it's still there. It was, the tower got hit. Was it last year, wasn't it, Dom? The tower, yeah. We had a bit of a tower situation right in the middle of COVID or around the same time.
It was struck by lightning. And it was replaced earlier this year thanks to the donations of our great supporters. Our listeners who got behind us and went, have a new antenna so we can hear you better.
Yeah. So lucky.
That's extraordinary. How fantastic.
Yeah.
So very, very lucky. Yes. So is there anything else, Dom? I'm just aware too, if there's questions from anybody who's there that wants us to answer, then we can do that too. But I guess a couple of things that we could also talk about is just some of the amazing artwork and stuff we found. One of the really amazing things that Jess and I, Jess Clayman, who was at the station, who's on maternity leave, that's 3 babies actually that's been born during the birthing of this book, has been the birthing of 3 actual humans. We found these amazing images by the Women's Warehouse Collective, and at the time they were these beautiful, beautiful things. Chapter 1, is that the best way to do it? I'm not very clever. If somebody else is clever, don't worry. There it is. Jess knows what she's doing. That's it. These beautiful, beautiful images that went with radio. And first of all, you might think, why do you need images for radio? But it's a different time. It's about, you know, you didn't have all this other competition. There were posters around the place. There were literally people walking past seeing them. And these amazing women who did all these other incredible things, but worked as a collective. Now, while it's incredible, it also makes it really, really hard as an archivist because you can't look up somebody's name, you know. So we've been able to find people and dig out, and, you know, and we're slowly pulling threads. So again, and that's when Crystal Set were tied up as well. That's when there's beautiful kind of alternative things that were so leading. They did a lot of stuff for, you know, I mean, things like Gay Waves and those incredible shows that were kind of representing for, you know, parts of the Sydney community that were very, very marginalised at the time. So we've been able to find these things too, things like posters. I mean, now is anybody checking who's doing the artwork for the podcast tiles? Like, I mean, I guess I should write that down, shouldn't I? You know, we're not doing that. We need to in the future. So there's all these beautiful things we've been able to find too. Sorry, were you doing the lean, Robbie? I just thought you were doing that. I'm going to
just on the note of posters, I had a funny experience with one of the posters because I actually took one of the photos of a mouth eating it was actually a rubber ear, and we had a big poster made up with radio with Byte for it, and it became a 2SER campaign. Must have been sort of 97 or something like that. But I used a friend's studio, or I thought it was a friend, and he took it to the printers, and I wasn't going to have photo by my name or anything like that, but it came back with his name, photo by blah 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 blah. And so whenever I used to see the poster around town, it used to make me fume, you know. So the politics of community radio, the same as politics anywhere else. That's what I was sort of laughing at.
Well, Dom, you found that too, haven't you, in the Bob Dylan chapter? Is that the only one where we've got conflicting versions?
There's a few places where things are remembered differently by different people. And what's beautiful is sometimes you get no, don't put my name on that. We did everything as a collective. But then even within the collective, please put my name on the picture because that was mine. And, you know, it's just the way things are. Sometimes you put a lot into it knowing that you're doing it for the greater good. and you're happy with that. Sometimes you know that you sweated over it and you don't know whether, you know, how much do I want to give of this? How much is actually me? And I think there's a case for both sides. Like, you know, I think your mate was a bit naughty, Robbie, in that instance.
Yeah. It was no big deal. It wasn't like I was getting paid for it, so it didn't really matter. It was, but it was very counter to the spirit of the place and the time, though, I've got to say, which is why it surprised me so much. And he, to be fair, he was not actually a 2SER volunteer. He was somebody who I knew had a studio. So, but yeah, it did remind me that there's always wrangling, no matter where you go.
And the other thing is, if two people remember it differently, maybe at the time, that's how they experienced it. And it would have been a third person who'd say, like Robert De Niro in that scene in Goodfellas, no, you were a little bit out of line. Of course, we don't want to go to that scene because it ends with someone anyway, let's move on.
It's getting weird now. It's getting weird.
It is, sorry. Took it too far. The good thing about working with Liz is whenever I went too far, she could bring me back, which was great. But there were occasions where I don't think she went too far, but when a third person was reading the draft, they'd go, "Oh, Dom, do you really need to say this?" And I'd laugh because it was the one time it wasn't me. It was Liz. And I think the fact
they were the dirty puns, weren't they?
They were some cheeky puns.
Yeah.
And everyone thought, oh, that's got to be Dom, cheap puns, which is a fair call. But I love the fact that people genuinely have difficulty telling who wrote what.
I think I do now too. I forget who did what bit. It was a genuine collaboration. So we were very lucky to find each other from that point of view.
Yeah, well, I was very lucky, and I want to say thank you once again, not just to Liz, but also to Jess Clayson, nee Clayman, who began this project. As if you're asking where you can hear this online, a lot of the interviews were turned into a podcast. What did you call it, Liz?
The 40 years of 2SER. I'm just going to put it in the chat in a minute because let's. So yeah, you can hear a lot of what. As we had an exhibition and launched, we used QR codes with images before QR codes were a bit kind of twitch-inducing. So, these little snippets of, you can hear people in their own words, literally in their own words, explaining, or descendants as well. So we had people like Yarrika Bales, for example, talking about the great Tiger Bales and Maureen Watson and those kind of contributions as well. So, if you want to follow up, you can do that too. Monica's flicked her video back on, which makes me think is it yours, Monica?
My video is on, but no, for no reason. I've just been flicking in and out. But I'm really, what's really struck me in this conversation is the kind of similarities between the culture that you're describing at 2SER then and possibly now, and the culture at Triple J at the time that I was there. So I never worked at 2SER in the early days. I was at Triple J when people like Jill Emberson and Amanda Collins and all those guys were at 2SER. But the culture is, and Robbie, I don't know whether you kind of recognise it as well, but it's very, very similar. Even the kind of talk about the, the kind of individualistic collective where, everybody thinks in their head that they're working as a collective, but really they're not. It's all about the individual.
Monica said that. I didn't say that.
No, of course not, Dom. So
and look, there was obviously a bit of a porous connection between the two as well. I mean, you can, you look again when it was up on the 26th floor, you'd look out the window and see the ABC sign. It was right next to it, so it's probably no surprise that there was quite a bit of cultural leakage.
Yes, and also the similarities between your with Freaky Monday. What was the name of the program, Robbie?
Aloha Freaky Monday.
Aloha Freaky Monday, and I put a note in the chat, but it also made me laugh out loud in terms of remembering a program that I did at Triple J, which was called Shipbuilding for Pleasure, which had absolutely nothing. And the program had nothing to do with shipbuilding or shipbuilding for pleasure or anything else, but just the kind of the freedom to be able to innovate, and it was the same at both places. That freedom.
Yeah, and I think unfortunately, I think that that has been lost a little bit in parts of the ABC at times. I think that the capacity to be able to use the metaphor, to push the boat out and let it sink is not there as much as perhaps it has been in the past, and that's where you really learn, as we know.
Yeah.
You really learn from failing as opposed to just succeeding.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree.
We should also mention, I was going to flick it up, but I think I'm a bit Zoom traumatized by putting a PowerPoint up. That's my day job, is teaching PowerPoints over Zoom, so I won't do that. But one of the things we did find too was a slide, like of what was Richard Kingsmill back in the day. And there's a chapter on that too, of me holding the slide. And I remember looking at it, because again, no way to look at it, I just held it up to the light over here, over in building 10, and went, I think that's Richard Kingsmill. So I sent a very sheepish message of the picture of me holding the thing with my phone saying, excuse me, Mr. Kingsmill, Mr. Owner of all of the music at the ABC now, is this you by any chance? In a wonderful Hawaiian shirt as well. And very kindly he, agreed, outed himself, and told us this story, which then we found out, and he came and had a chat to us in the lead up to the 40th. Then we found out that some stuff that he made for us during his time at Triple J is actually held at the National Film and Sound Archive, but they didn't know it was him. It was mislabeled. So what's been really nice as part of this project as well is we've been able to find that, marry them together, and so actually take what we've got at the station, compare it to what's held in other places, and kind of close loops as well, so that we can get this kind of bigger archive going on. Oh, thanks, Martin's just shared that in the chat for anybody that's interested too. Hello, Martin. So the current head of 2SER. So yeah, that's great too. All that stuff we've been able to find, and those slides now are at the NSFA as well. So if anybody wants to go and get out their slide projector and click the buttons, they're all there too. Did we have any? We wanted any questions? Was there? We getting kind of close to time.
Yeah, we are getting close to time. So if there are any questions, now is the time.
I'll anticipate the first one. Order your book now, $29. Wait till it's in the shops next year, $35.
We're on the right side of desperate when it comes to selling books, by the way. Just on the right side. We've also got hard copies. Don't worry about that supply chain problem, friends. We've got them, don't we? We've got Santa Claus.
This is the coolest Sydney present that you can give someone for Christmas. Essentially, like the cool person that's impossible to buy for in your life, you just out-cooled them if you get them this. So spread the word, right? And I just wanted to take the opportunity also to shout out the people who are those long-running mainstays of 2SER, because I know Anthony Dockrell is there and like holding the fort, and was there when I was there too. So hi Anthony and Michael Jones. Yes.
That picture was attributed to you though, Robbie. I think we did get that one right.
I know. I don't remember taking that photo, but there you go.
Iconic, that's what makes 2SER, I know you have the 46 boxes, but it's the people and that are holding those memories. And so, and very few places, I think, have that kind of passion and love for them that manages to hold people in place in those institutions. So, that means 2SER is doing something special, and those people are a really big part of that. But yeah, there are so many awesome people that are involved. I wanted to shout out Miles Martigoni as well, who was my producer as well, or kind of tried to manage us, basically, the mess that we were, and, is making amazing podcasts and stuff. So yeah, there's so many great people. And the other thing I wanted to shout out as well is all of that specialist programming that no one else does, like Jailbreak. I think Jailbreak was one of the most revelatory shows that I ever heard on 2SER as well. And I mean, who else does that? I mean, there's the pushing the limits in terms of the art form and the medium of radio that Robbie's been talking about, but then also people just carving out a space for voices that never get heard. And 2SER does that. We need more of that in Sydney. So yeah, thank you 2SER. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, thank you.
One of the people in charge of this has just thrown up a question in the chat. Shall we read a favourite section from the book? Is that okay if I read a section?
Yeah, I think you should go for it, Dom.
There's a short chapter I really like, chapter 31, page 136. It's called Bangin' Tunes by Request. Do not tape over.
Maybe not the whole chapter though.
Sorry?
Maybe not the whole chapter.
It's 2 pages. It's a page and a half. It's tiny.
Okay.
So what this is about is there was a period of bomb threats, but let me read it to you. This is from an interview with Kay Blackman. When I first started at 2SER, maybe it was a few years later, we had bomb threats all the time. Kay Blackman, program manager from 1985 to 1990, and then station manager thereafter, is reminiscing, if you could call it that. Times are tough for journalists now. Come close to uncovering or disclosing an uncomfortable truth, and the Australian Federal Police are seizing computers, hard disks, filing cabinets from home and office. But bomb threats? Sure, what with its championing of country music and dance music, providing dedicated programming to and for LGBTQI communities, producing award-winning socially conscious documentaries and current affairs programs, reporting on stories ignored by mainstream media that touch actual, real, everyday people, may put the occasional nose out of joint, but bomb threats? Someone outside was threatening the university, Kay explains. Oh, of course, a bomb threat to the university. Incapable of making the brutalist tower any uglier, really, but it was still a danger to the station on the 26th floor. It went on for weeks, Kay says, nearly every second day, requiring everyone to vacate the building. And make no mistake, 26 floors are quite a journey. You're not supposed to use the lift in case of emergencies, although there's a footnote. And besides, you'd never make it out in time. The all clear would arrive long before the lift. As Tanya Plebisek recalled, it seemed like I spent as much time queuing for the lift as I did actually in a studio. So, Kay continues, going down, your legs are like jelly at the end. In addition, one of the 2SER staff required being fireman chaired down each time. Thankfully, the threat was usually called in at 9 to 9:30 a.m. We all stopped coming to work that early so we could avoid it. A one-off bomb scare, stressful and disrupting, can be overcome relatively quickly. A series of bomb threats, however, are extremely traumatic. Understandably, everyone gets a bit on edge. Remember though, before the digital revolution, recording was done on magnetic tape that was expensive and difficult to come by. It was reused wherever possible, if you could get your hands on it. Competition was so intense, it led to hoarding. If you obtained any, you would defend it, often with pointed messages scrawled on the box, do not erase or do not remove. Sometimes something emphatic like, do not touch this on pain of death. One day, Kay recalls, amid bomb threats and heightened stress levels, somebody found a box bearing just such a message. There was commotion, Kay says. We had to decide what to do. Nobody could actually say they knew who it belonged to. So the bloody bomb squad had to come in with its little robot and take this thing out. Without disclosing further details, Kay confirms it was somebody's innocent tape, sealed in the provocatively labelled box. Of course, as station manager, it fell upon her to explain to the authorities who had just deactivated some of 3M's finest used reels of magnetic tape. We write these things on our boxes because tape is so scarce.
Thank you, Tom.
And there are more excellent stories like that, period.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Oh, there's another video.
No, there's no other questions. There's no questions. So I think, Liz, at this point, we might hand over to Mark Evans, Professor Mark Evans, who most recently has been head of the School of Communication at UTS, and he knows an awful lot about 2SER, but he knows an awful lot about how important 2SER has been to the student body as well. So Mark, why don't you take it away for us?
Thanks, Monica. Hi, everyone. So my involvement with 2SER probably started in 2009 at Macquarie University, and then I got closer to the antenna by coming to UTS. But what the book shows, and I'm just going to make sure I can hold it up too, is, there we go, everyone hold it up, is that that's just a fraction of the history of 2SER. And I think what we've heard today is an awesome conversation. My thanks to all the panelists, because it shows the fun, the intrigue, the curiosity, the interest that 2SER has generated over the years. And all of that is captured in this book. Congratulations to Liz and Dom. This is such a good read. It's accessible, it's fun, it's, you know, engaging. I'd love that you've written a book with 46 chapters. You can say that for the rest of your life. But it's really, really terrific book. And I know it's been in the chat, standanddeliver.com.au. Just go to the website now before you forget and buy the book. As Jess said, this is a great Christmas present. I've checked here locally in my house and it fits in a Christmas stocking. So there's 46 stockings you can stuff it with, I'm sure. So do that. And it's also a great book for anyone who, you know, worked at 2SER, listened to 2SER, or has turned on a radio in their entire life. So if you know anyone like that, buy them this book for Christmas. It's a great book. Congratulations, Liz and Dom. It really is tremendous. And thank you everyone for today. That's all from us. Have a good day, everyone.
Very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, Jess. Thanks, Robbie.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys, and well done. Fantastic.
A pleasure.
Thanks so much.
Congratulations.
Thanks. Good luck on Saturday, Jess.
Yeah.